Okay, on to the suspended chords that we're going to use in this progression. Okay, the first one that we're going to use is based on the 1 chord, which is a D major. Okay, the notes are D, F sharp, and A. And by briefly suspending that F sharp, taking it away from the chord and replacing it with an E, we wind up with the sound D suspended second. Okay, now in this case we're going to resolve it right back to the D chord itself, and that's quite often what happens when you're using these suspended chords. Although on their own they have a nice color as well that you could use just completely in place of a standard chord. Okay, just on its own it has a nice color, and you need to figure if that's going to work with the melody and the song and that sort of thing, okay, on a case-by-case basis. In this case we're simply creating a small little melodic fragment that goes through the progression. Okay, it sort of echoes through the chord progression in the same spot. Okay, D to D suspended second. Okay, there's also the possibility of creating a suspended 4th chord. Okay, now if we were to place our little finger down here on the G, okay, that would be from D, D to E to F sharp to G would be the 4th note, hence suspended 4th. Okay, and that's always, it's a suspended chord if you replace the 3rd. Okay, if the 3rd is still present somehow, then it's an add chord. Okay, let's just as a little side road here for a second, consider D, D suspended second. Now if we were to put the F sharp down here, okay, keep that F sharp in the chord, all right, and then hold these 2 notes down here, that gives us the 5th and the root again. Now if we were to add the high E on top of that and still have that F sharp in there, that would be an added chord. That would be a D add 2, okay? Okay, so we have a particular ring that happens between those 2 notes as well, and that's kind of the sound of those added chords. Okay, that's just one possible voicing of many, but just so you know, we can't go through every chord here, but that's the way that works. All right. Now back to the progression. The next move after D suspended second and back to D is to go to the A chord, and the same thing's going to happen there. We're going to take that 3rd, which is the C sharp here, 2nd fret of the B string, and we're going to release it so we get the open B string, briefly suspending the 3rd to a 2nd. Okay, then moving back to it. Okay, now we have our first 2 chord motions. Okay, now we're landing on the next chord of the progression, the 6th, okay, which is B minor, and we're going to... All right, so as important as it is to understand individual chords and their different colors and flavors, like major and suspended 2nd, suspended 4th, and dominant chords as well, okay? Even more important than that, within the bigger musical context inside of the song, is to understand the way chord progressions work somewhat. And we're going to go over now what are known as cadences, and that's going to lead us through some interesting ideas and ways to change up this B section, or this sort of bridge to this chord progression here. Okay, so first of all, I want you to understand what a cadence is, and we'll start with the perfect cadence, meaning the move from the 5 chord to the 1 chord. Okay, now there are some important motions that happen inside these chords, especially when using the 5/7th chord, in this case G7, which would be G, B, D, and F. Now that F note really makes something important happen in there. So as you know, this voicing here, okay, and move it to the C. Now listen to a couple important things happening within there. From the G chord, there's a B note, okay, and which is the leading tone to the root, which is C. So that the 3rd of the G7 chord leads back to the root of the 1 chord. Okay, so that's a very important motion, that half step. That's known as the leading tone. Okay, now listen also for this motion, which is the F and the G7 chord, moving down to the third of the home chord. So that we have here moving down from an F to an E. Okay. Okay. If you get good at listening to those things, you can sort of hear those inside motions. Now this is really important because our ear really expects to hear this chord move to this chord. Okay, it's very resolved. It's also very predictable. So the perfect cadence is something that you use to sort of establish the home chord of the key. Okay, so once you hear that move from the 5 chord to the 1, you've really established the key. And that happens in the main A section of this progression, which is 1, 1. Okay, that is already giving this the color of D minor 7th. Okay, and then I added in the D again here. Okay, and that way it can ring against that high E string. Okay, and the high E string being from D out, it's the 9th. Okay, so we have a D minor 9th here. Okay, so a little bit tricky to finger because you don't want to get anything touching that high E string. Okay, you need that ringing. It's interesting how these extended chords really start to make a rather dissonant sounding interval like this. Okay, that's kind of a harsh sound on its own. When that's in context, however, here it has a really beautiful sound. Just food for thought. Okay, then we're moving on to the G chord. All right, in this case it's a G dominant 7th sound. Okay, but we're going to refinger everything here. I'm grabbing the low G with my thumb. Okay, and then grabbing the 7th here. Okay, grabbing the F, and that's going to be in common then. That's a tone that's in common between these two chords. You just have to finger it differently. All right, in D minor, it's the minor 3rd. In G 7th, in this case, it's the dominant 7th. All right, then the next note I'm grabbing here is the A on the G string. That already gives us our 9th. So root, G, F 7th, A 9th, B, the open B string here is the 3rd, and then that high E string is in common again, and that gives us the 13th in this case. So this makes a G 13th chord. Okay, that's a really cool sound as well. So from D minor 9th to G 13th. Okay, and the picking pattern here, I won't go through it the whole time. It's really easy. You're just picking 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. You're going like this.